Welcome, everyone. It is the top of the hour. So my name is Chip Cauldron. I am a co-director of the Center for Justice Research and Innovation, along with Vivian. I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker in just a second. I wanted to take a second and just thank everyone for their presence here and their participation. It's with a measure of pride and appreciation that I've witnessed the goings on up till now, and I think we're going to move into a very interesting direction with our keynote. So without further ado, it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce Mary Lou Leary as our keynote speaker today. Her career and mine have actually overlapped over the years, and probably more than she knows. She has been a very strong and positive influence for me in the work that I have done. So Mary Lou, I want you to know that you are an influencer, right? And I will say this, in addition to her current and again, influential position as a member of the CNA Board of Trustees, Mary Lou has held leadership positions in the Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, the COPS Office, Office of National Drug Control Policy, National Center for Victims of Crime, and also as an assistant U.S. attorney in D.C. So a tremendous, and again, influential career. When we first asked her to serve as our keynote, she responded with her typical enthusiasm, warmth, and focus. And so we are indeed fortunate to have her with us today, and we welcome her as our keynote speaker with our own brand of warmth and enthusiasm. So Mary Lou, please go ahead.
All right, thanks a lot, Chip, for that kind introduction and for asking me to participate today. I looked over the registration list and I saw so many names that were familiar to me from my approximately 30 years at the Department of Justice and working in the criminal justice system. So good to see your names again. You know, frankly, I'm just in awe of this collective undertaking. Planning for the future is not for the faint of heart. And it's just really tough when you're in the throes of your everyday responsibilities to make the time and mostly the mental space to think about moving beyond the struggles of today and just to envision a better future. Having spent my whole career in the throes of that struggle, I know it is not easy. But like death and taxes, one thing we can count on is that the future is coming. And the waves of change are coming faster and faster. Just think about how fast and how far computer technology has come in the last 50 years. It wasn't all that long ago. We had the lab coat mainframe computers. But the future will be characterized not just by speed, but also by global interconnectedness. Think about how COVID-19 made us aware of those global connections. Global interconnectedness means at least three things for us. Number one, we have opportunities to learn from criminal justice reform around the world. And number two, an unpredicted event in one place could promote reform or undermine reform around the world. And three, increasingly, crime and criminal networks have moved beyond national borders. Across the globe, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and robotics are changing the way we live, learn, and do business. All these changes are playing out in a world of really unstable political landscapes and environmental instability and global crises. So more than ever, we need to understand the crime and social environments in which criminal justice systems will be operating in order to achieve legitimacy and justice and safety. That understanding can help us avoid the kind of tunnel vision you get from focusing on one particular criminal justice agency. If there's anything we've learned after 30 years or more of criminal justice reform, it's that you really have to plan for the whole system. We are all connected. Corrections, courts, judiciary, on and on. It affects all of us. So exchanging knowledge and perspectives will give us a shared understanding that'll provide a solid foundation for all of us. So how do we move forward? Well, with your help, the CNA's Project on American Justice has done a really outstanding job examining the future roles of the most important players in the justice system. The project has put out great papers that articulate the risks and the opportunities, and they suggest concrete action steps using future analysis as an approach. But today, I'm going to propose that we take a step back before we implement those steps. And let's make sure that first we've considered the entire landscape. Here's a spoiler alert for you. I don't have the answers, but I just have some big questions for your consideration. So let's ask, what are the major shifts in crime and society that the criminal justice systems should begin to prepare for? Considering this question can give us all a deeper understanding. For example, a better understanding of future demand and understanding what drives future demand, population, crime patterns, periodic incidents. The answers can help us develop resilience to potential shocks, prevent harm, and maybe create pathways to innovation. And it certainly can help prevent us from investing in reforms that will very soon become irrelevant, like physical training facilities that are going to be overtaken tomorrow for augmented reality and digital learning environments. So if we ask the questions, that can become a starting point for better system-wide forecasting. Let's start by considering 6 megatrends that the United States and all countries really should understand. And first is the continuing growth of supercities, known as megalopolises. That is a mouthful. But we know that a megalopolis is a group of metropolitan areas, a whole group, but they're perceived as a continuous urban area. The CNA 2040 future scenario in their papers points to 5 of these areas in the United States. They share things like common modes of transportation, economy, resources, communications, ecology, and so on. And they're integrated enough so that coordinating criminal justice policy will become increasingly necessary. They challenge us to engage in new, larger scale thinking about criminal justice systems, and we're going to have to plan across jurisdictional lines. Second, a growing and aging society. I'm living proof of that. The population in the United States is expected to grow to 355 million by 2040. All things being equal, more people means more demands on the justice system. But demographic shifts have more complex effects than that. We know that younger groups, especially under 30, are more apt to be involved in and be victims of crime. So if you have decreases in those cohorts, maybe we'll have decreases in crime rates as well. But meanwhile, the percentage of older Americans is increasing very rapidly. By 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be of retirement age. But while older folks are generally less involved in and less affected by crime, they may be more likely to overestimate their chances of becoming a victim. And they may, in fact, be more susceptible to, say, online scams. And they can be a lot harder to reach to provide effective victim services. So third megatrend, a globalizing economy. There's a lot of political and economic debate about the benefits of globalization, but the consensus is that globalization will continue in some form. As global trade and economics and economies advance, we know that there are more and more opportunities for illegal economies as well. For example, the globalized pharmaceutical chain certainly contributed to the rise of synthetic drugs and the unpredictability of the supply of street drugs in this country. And global conflicts can have some contagion events. We've seen that when wars conclude, there's a surplus of firearms available, and it promotes shifts in drug trafficking and human trafficking routes. So the fourth megatrend, persistent inequalities. Over the last decade, we've seen maybe a little reduction in global economic inequality. Like maybe China and India are doing a little better. But whether this modest progress is sustained or not, we know that inequalities that have built up over centuries are not expected to disappear overnight. Sustained economic and race-based inequality will continue to pose challenges for criminal justice systems, especially because those who are most economically and socially disadvantaged are least likely to see criminal justice agencies as legitimate. Fifth, technological acceleration. New technologies are developing so rapidly in biological, physical, and digital spheres. And of particular importance are AI and the emergence of cyber-physical systems that link physical and digital worlds. These new technologies can bring great improvements to the criminal justice system, but they can bring new forms of crime as well. Just consider the possibilities with AI. Fraud, forgery, snooping, cybercrime, and so on. You're going to hear a lot more about that in the next panel that Chip is going to be leading. The accelerating pace of technological and social change demands also a much speedier reaction. This is a big challenge for overburdened and under-resourced criminal justice systems. And then the development of new domains of internet activity like dark web, cryptocurrencies, they all pose new crime challenges for us. And the breakdown of boundaries between physical and virtual worlds and public and private spheres can create a much greater level of systemic risk. Okay, so let's give some consideration to what big societal and crime shifts the criminal justice system should begin to prepare for. There are many, but we're just going to take a look at 5 of them. First, the broadening information space. Improvements in data capture and storage mean that the average domestic crime scene in many countries already involves the seizure of multiple connected devices. So each device can hold vast volumes of information. More powerful tracking and sensing technologies like natural language processing, image recognition, increase the amount of information that can be added and probably should be added to any case file. So this data now forms a starting point for criminal investigations. This could increase the chances of a just outcome, but investigators are facing the difficulty of digesting and analyzing these huge volumes of data at every stage in the criminal justice process. Surveillance tracking, that offers significant opportunities for law enforcement, for crime prevention, and for efficiency. But they also raise questions for civil liberties and criminal justice legitimacy that the CNA Project on American Justice has discussed. The project emphasizes the importance of engaging in open, ethical debate and safeguarding rights. We cannot afford to have the kinds of consequences that we had early on in reform, like things like bias in early forms of predictive policing and facial recognition. We need the faith and the belief in the legitimacy of our system. As the information space grows, it's also democratizing. So more people can produce, share, and access information from increasingly disparate sources. This could be great for law enforcement collecting crowdsourced intelligence, but it also poses the risk of viral dissemination of misinformation and unrest. Then we have new models of work. So you have these broad trends in the labor market and the future of work. That's going to challenge criminal justice as well. So you face a lot of tough questions. How far do agencies go to embrace flexible working schedules and the gig economy? How do you integrate the four-generation workforce? How to better incorporate the talents of marginalized groups? And importantly, how do you recruit and train and retain personnel who have the necessary skills in a technological age? Likewise, as technology advances, we move away from a paper-based system, criminal justice folks are going to have to work in new ways. And as we incorporate technology into treatment and services for victims, incarcerated people, and community, we better guard against dehumanization and against the barriers that can be created by the use of technology. Third, identity and ideological conflict. So many countries are experiencing increasingly vigorous conflict around identity and ideas. Activism around recognizing full civil rights for marginalized groups has often provoked reactions and resistance, sometimes violent resistance. There are signs that identity culture wars are growing, and there have been significant increases in reported hate crimes and race-based terrorism. Fourth, climate change and resource scarcity. Extreme weather creates additional public safety demands, and this can have implications for the functioning of justice infrastructure. Weather genuinely affects crime patterns. For example, looting often follows natural disasters, and in some American cities, murder rates can correlate with warmer weather. Even bigger geopolitical issues could emerge as resource scarcity creates local and global conflict. You'll see this impact immigration and illegal markets as well. Okay, fifth and last, the rise of the market economy. In this economy, private investment in security services already exceeds public investment in many areas. You know, in the US and the UK, there are as many private security guards as there are police personnel. Private investment in security devices, consultants, technologies continues to grow and will continue to grow. And meanwhile, some private forms of community activism on crime have increased. This could continue as citizens get empowered by new technology tools. Global businesses with influence and power across continents and regulatory regimes are increasingly posing challenges to state authority. Complex terrorism and fraud investigations require access to information that's held by global technology firms and financial institutions. So we need to be building relationships and legal frameworks to support collaborations with these companies. And there are issues that affect the criminal justice system in kind of a cyclical fashion, and they recur. So in the future, we're likely to experience again recession, moral panics, controversy, large-scale public disorder. Since in the post-war era, most countries have experienced a recession about every 10 years. So sizable jurisdictions can also expect occasional public disorder and rioting, and many countries have experienced crises in police legitimacy, with or without police misconduct. That's a lot to plan for. I know that each of you can list many more trends and societal shifts that will face all of us, and I hope that you do. It is a huge challenge to kind of step back and give due consideration to these trends and shifts. Ask the questions. Doing so will help you fashion a more intentional and thoughtful path forward. You have everything you need to succeed. Collectively, you have hundreds of years of life experience and professional experience. You have the smarts and you have the will to create a more just, equitable, and effective justice system. And you can call on all the resources that you and the connections that you've forged by participating in the Project on American Justice. So the long-term future looks bright. I know you're up for it, and I look forward to celebrating your success. Thanks.
All right, Mary Lou, thank you very much. Delivered as expected, very thoughtful, very thought-provoking. I can tell you that in the few minutes you've been talking, there's been a very active chat going on about some of your ideas. And so we're all really energized and inspired. You have some great thinking and some great synthesis of ideas. And one thing I love particularly about what you said, it's a theme in most of what I do and what I talk about, is that we do have what we need to be successful and to solve these problems. We don't have to search outside of ourselves to figure this out. If we can collaborate better and communicate better and marshal our resources, we do have what we need. And I very much appreciate that thinking on your part. So, Vivian, I don't know if this was planned, but we have a few minutes. If anybody would like to offer a comment or ask a question of Mary Lou, I think that would be okay, Mary Lou, yes?
Sure. Can't promise I can answer, but.
Come on, I saw the chat going on. Who's got a question? Who's got a thought? All right. So I'm going to chime in here, Mary Lou. I'm going to reflect some of the chat that I saw and this question. You make a very good point about instability, global instability, and how that affects our work and our systems. And I'm wondering if we can think about that people will increasingly, or maybe should, or maybe are getting back into practice of looking towards the justice system for stability when we face these instabilities. And by that, I don't mean looking for a larger role or a more powerful role, but are there opportunities in collaboration and integration with justice and community? Are there opportunities to better support the stability that we need in times like this?
You know, Chip, I think there are major opportunities. I would start by saying I think it's just critical, particularly at this point in time in the United States anyway, for us to do everything we can to improve the public's faith in all of our democratic institutions, but in the justice system in particular. That's the bedrock of what Americans rely on to make them feel safe, to make them feel protected, and to assure them that when things go wrong, and they will, there will be consequences and there will be improvements, and they can look to a safer day. And I hope that we find better ways, and I know CNA works on this, to bolster that kind of confidence and to bolster the legitimacy of the system. So much of it really depends on how thoughtful we are about connecting with our constituents, and really everybody is our constituent. So that's kind of the bottom line for me.
Thank you for that. That reminds me of another thought, and something that I've come to think about more in recent years. And it goes something like this. Safety, right? The safety that we look for and the trust that we look for is not necessarily an endpoint, right? We all want to be safe. We want to have that trust, right? We want to build that trust, but that is a never-ending task. You know, systems change, dynamics change, right? Oh, this whole steep process, the politics change, the finances change. And so the trust and the stability that we need is more like a practice that we need to engage in all the time, right? It's not, there's no formula for achieving it and then stopping and resting on our laurels. This is something that we have to work at all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, we have a question here. This is from Vivian. With diversity and globalization, are there lessons or other global entities we should be looking to as we do this work?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when I was thinking about preparing for today, I looked at some resources that I hadn't necessarily looked to during my career in criminal justice. Things like the World Economic Forum, organizations like that actually do think about issues like the future of the justice system, which may be surprising for some folks. I think to look to organizations that have a global perspective, not just domestic, can really teach us about how to think more broadly. So I would look to that. And the other thing is, I am sure I haven't really looked at this, but I'm sure there are lessons from all of the fallout from Brexit, which really linked all those European Union countries together in new ways. Once you start sharing your economy, that's kind of a baseline and has to affect all of the institutions of your society. So I would be really interested. I would hope somebody is kind of getting ahead of that curve and analyzing those kinds of shifts.
Thank you. So we have Mariana has a question that she'd love to ask. So Mariana, please go ahead.
Yes, hello, Mary. My name is Mariana, and I'm an assistant professor over at UMKC in Kansas City. So I loved your presentation because I'm an international criminologist, so I see a lot of benefit to not only learning from local entities, but also our international partners. So you talked at the end of your presentation, you discussed the importance of creating a just and equitable justice system. Do you think that is going to rely more and more on our multilateral partnerships that we have, given kind of how the world is shifting and all the different current events that have occurred? I only asked this because I led a study abroad this summer to Serbia, and it was on international criminal law and comparative criminology. And all of the international partners that we met with, there was kind of a discussion around the new creation alliances across nation states, because more and more people are kind of shifting away or losing trust in those big international entities that were formed after those moments of crisis that we've had. So it's a long question, but
Yeah, I don't necessarily have the answers, but I think it's a really important question, Mariana. Especially because the populations around the world are shifting so significantly and so constantly. We really are sort of citizens of the world, and we haven't really quite figured out the best ways of dealing with that yet. But we're going to have to, and in the justice system as well, particularly when you think about it in the context of all this technological revolution. There's a kind of, just look at COVID. There's no such thing as a crisis that affects just one country. We are all way beyond the point of being able to kind of maintain our own little borders and mindsets. I don't know what, if you have things like the United Nations and NATO And their purpose was to create just the kind of world that you're talking about and probably hoping for. But as you say, you know, that they're not as many people believe in them and maybe support them as did originally. We're going to have to either revive that or probably more possibly have to create new forms. And that means that our international leaders are going to have to at least start talking to each other about these kinds of things. We're all in this. We're all in it together. So I don't have the answers, but I think it's a really, really important idea.
Good. Thank you again, Mary Lou. We are all in this together. And as you said, within us, we have the answers that we're seeking. If we hold ourselves accountable to anything here at CNA, we hold ourselves accountable to our schedules. So we're at the end of the keynote speech. There are other questions coming in through the chat. I can see them. Let me just say this, because we're going to go into the 2 breakout sessions, and that's going to conclude the symposium for today. So those of you who have questions that you want to pursue, whether they're specific questions or if they're thoughts and questions about the Project on American Justice and how we should proceed with this work, please reach out to us. We will take heed of those questions. We'll answer them as best as we can. And I just encourage you to continue to engage with us. This project will be around for some time. And I want to just take this last second that I have to express my sincere appreciation to Mary Lou for responding to our invitation, for being so thoughtful in her remarks, and for thinking so broadly. So many, many thanks, Mary Lou.
Thank you.
Let's take a break. There's 2 sessions coming up, one on technology that was referred to by our keynote speaker, and another very important one on violence reduction. So please make good use of those opportunities. And as I said, stay in touch. Let us know what you're thinking. We will listen. Okay, thanks everybody.